Hi there, my name is Steve Gearhart and this is COVID-19 Cooking. This is the show for you guys who are bored and want to try different foods to keep from being bored and going insane. So today we're going to go on and we're going to make pickled onions, but a special type of pickled onions. Okay, so a few weeks ago we were really trapped into our apartments or residences, wherever you live, and everything was shut down. So I said, let's pretend that you're in a British pub and put on some BBC stuff or soccer or something on your television to pretend that you're at a British bar or a pub, and make sure you had some nice dark beers or brown nut ales or things like that, something British to drink, something heavy. And to go with that, we made pickled eggs British pub style. So today we're going to add to our British pub, and the food that we're going to add today is pickled onions British pub style. So let's get started. Now obviously the first thing you're going to want to have is the proper jar. Actually, it can be any jar as long as it has a lid and it's clean. And by clean we mean that it's somewhat sanitized. Now we're talking about pickling here and not canning. Canning is a whole different process. For pickling, really all you need to do, you can actually put it into the oven, set it to 250 degrees, take the lids off, put the jars in there, and let it sit in there for about 10 minutes or so. That'll do the trick. Or you can put it under boiling water, have it turn the sink on and make sure the water is really hot, and just kind of run it in and around the jar, and that'll do the trick as well. So that way you can kind of clean or sanitize your jar and make it ready for pickling. The next thing are the ingredients. All you need are small onions. You can use pearl onions, the really small ones, or you get something a little bit larger like these guys. I don't know if you can see that. And just kind of something that'll fit in the palm of your hand that you can pack into a jar. And the only other thing that you absolutely have to have is malt vinegar. Now we're making British pub style pickled onions. So the other vinegars really aren't going to cut it. So white distilled vinegar, you don't want to use that. There's other kinds of vinegars out there, but really what you want to use is malt vinegar. And you can find them in your grocery store, but they're probably only going to have one or two brands. I go to Harris Teeter, and this is what I get: London Pub Malt Vinegar. There you go. Now, in a pinch, you can use apple cider vinegar, but it's not quite the same taste. It's not quite the same thing, but it gets close enough. So if you don't have access to malt vinegar, use apple cider vinegar, and you should be able to find that anywhere. So you got your onions, you got your malt vinegar. Now what you want to do is you take your onions and you're going to peel them. Now this is where my research shows me a couple different thoughts on peeling onions. One thought is that you just take the onion as is, and you take a knife, you cut the base off, the root off, and you cut the top off, and you just peel the onion and you peel the skins off. Or you can make it a little bit easier, and you can take those onions and you can boil them, do a quick boil, or first cut off the root, do a quick boil, and then when you take them out of the boil and you shock them, put them in ice water, and you pat them down, all you have to do is squeeze the top and they just kind of sort of pop out of the skin. Here's the problem with that. Most British pub pickled onions that you find in a British pub usually have a crunch to them. They're usually crunchy, they're not soggy, they're not soft. The problem with boiling is that you're cooking an onion and you're making it soft. The idea is, of course, that you let it dry after you do boil it and peel it that way, but somehow it still sometimes gets a little soft, a little soggy kind of feel to it, and that's not really what you want. So I went with the way of just taking the onion as it is, raw, cutting the root, cutting the top, and peeling it. It takes time. So if you have access to Spotify, find a playlist and put it on play and listen to that while you're peeling your onions. Once you peel the onions, then this is the next part that you have to do. You put them in a bowl, obviously, And you're going to take either kosher salt or sea salt, and you're going to pour quite a bit over top of the onions. And what you're going to do is you're basically going to sweat the onions using salt. You don't want to use iodized salt. That is a no-no. Don't do that. Use kosher salt or sea salt. Kind of get your hands in there, dig up the onions, make sure everything's covered, and you leave them in the bowl. You can leave them uncovered. If you want to cover them, you can put like a dish towel over top of it and let them sweat overnight. Now, there's some people who say that you only need to sweat them for a couple hours or so. And it seemed like more people said overnight than a couple hours, so I just went ahead and did overnight. At the bottom of the bowl, you should see a small amount of liquid that comes out of the onions. What that's going to do is going to help make the onion even more crunchier as it sits in the pickling brine. So once, basically overnight, it doesn't have to be 24 hours, it can be just overnight. The next day, all you're going to do is you're going to take those onions and you're going to just rinse them in a colander or a strainer, however you want to do it, and get that salt off of it, and pat dry them a little bit, and set them to the side. Get your jar, make sure it's sterilized or clean as possible, and then once that happens, then you're going to put the onions into the jar. And you're going to pack them as much as densely as you possibly can. Then the next step, if all you're going to do is put in the vinegar, is you literally take the vinegar, take your onion-filled jar, and you just pour it in. Fill it all the way to the top, close it off, and then you throw it in a nice cool place for 6 to 8 weeks. So you can do that with just the simple malt vinegar. Actually, when you pickle onions, you can do that with any type of vinegar. You can just put it in there and throw it to the side for 2 months, 6 to 8 weeks, and it'll do the trick. Now, some people, like me, like to add flavors to their brine. So this is the point where you can use pickling spices. You can get that anywhere in any grocery store. Or you can make up your own recipe. There's plenty of them online. Choose what you want. It really depends on what kind of taste you're trying to get out of it. What I did for this batch is I used, and I didn't really use a teaspoon or a tablespoon, I used the palm of my hand to kind of do a measuring of what I was going to throw in there, so it's not an exact science. So what I put in there, I put in whole black peppercorns. Okay. Again, just in the palm. And I got some cloves, whole cloves, which smell really great. Again, just pour them into the palm of your hand. And I decided to use 4 bay leaves. And what I did was I took the vinegar, I put it into a pan, and it takes about, to fill up one of these, it takes about 2 of these. This is 32 ounce, by the way. So I pour this into the pan, and then I throw in the spices. I throw in the whole cloves, in there. I do that with the peppercorns, throw that in there. Now with the bay leaves, you can do it one of 2 ways. You can finely chop them up, take the main stem off of it. You don't want that in there. You can chop it up a little bit and just throw it into with everything else, and that's fine. Or you can put all 4 whole in there. It's just that after it boils, you're going to want to pull those 4 bay leaves out. If you chop them up really finely, you can actually leave that in there in the brine. Now, as the brine boils, once it starts to boil, that's when you take a tablespoon of sugar, white sugar, throw it in there. Some people actually use brown sugar. I'll try that next time to see how that works. But this time I used white sugar. So the only real measurement I have is 1 tablespoon of sugar. Throw it in there, let it come to a boil, let it boil just for a few seconds just so that the sugar dissolves. And this is important. You take it off the heat, the brine off the heat, and you let it cool. You let it go down to room temperature. You don't want to pour it into your jar filled with the pickles while it's still hot, because that means it's going to cook the onions, and that's not what you want. So you wait for it to get to room temperature, and once it's at room temperature, then you pour it into the jar, seal it up, and then set it to the side for the next 6 to 8 weeks. So when you're done, This is what it should look like. Okay. Alright, so you can see some of the peppercorns, the cloves, a little bit of the bay leaf is in there. But this is kind of how you want it to look like. Now, a couple things about this particular brine. Malt vinegar changes the color of whatever it is pickling. So like for the eggs, remember how the eggs had that kind of like, dark color to it on the outside? Same thing's going to happen to the onions. The onions are going to take on like a golden brown look to it. And that's normal and that's supposed to happen. That's actually part of the taste. The other thing I want to tell you about this brine, and in particular the ingredients I used, the spices I used, it is going to make your kitchen smell like Christmas. It is awesome. Right now my kitchen smells great. It's coming into this room right here and I'm loving it. It smells like Christmas in August. Okay, so that's kind of how you do it. And I'm going to show the video now in a few moments and of me actually putting this together. And remember, once you're done, you seal it up, you don't open it, you put it in a cool place or in the fridge for 6 to 8 weeks. So in 6 to 8 weeks, we're going to open this bad boy up and we're going to see how good these taste. All right? And that'll be another addition to our imaginary British pub with BBC on the television or soccer on the television, drinking our pints and eating our pickled eggs and soon pickled onions.
Bye.